The third declension, like the first and second declensions, has its own unique set of endings, all of which have to be memorized. The third declension is it is the most common declension. So you'll want to make sure that these endings are firmly set in your mind before moving forward. The good thing is that there are a number of similarities. They're not the same, but there are similarities to the first and second declensions. There's patterns which can be observed. So I'll point out some of those patterns in addition to pointing out the endings. Now, the first thing you need to know about the third declension is that it can be identified by the genitive singular which ends in s, or in is. Remember that that second principal part is going to tell you what declension a noun belongs to. So if we had our noun puella, puellai, the ae here is the genitive singular. It also told you what the stem was, and then we get the gender. We had our masculine, our second declension, amicus, amici. The I there tells us, oh, this is second declension. And then we're going to get a series of third declension nouns, like canis, canis, masculine, dog. This is tells us this is third declension. What's more is this second principal part, the genitive, is also going to give us the stem. All right, and this is very important because you're going to run into nouns like tempus, temporis, where the is, and this is neuter, it means time. The is tells us it's third declension, but this second principal part also tells us that the stem onto which you're going to add the endings is tempor, quite a bit different from the nominative singular, tempus. So pay attention to that second principal part. It will tell you that what nouns belong to the third declension and what the stem is going to be. The other thing to keep in mind is that third declension nouns can be masculine, feminine, or neuter. Here's a masculine, here's a neuter. We could also have virtus, virtutis, feminine, so there's the is, third declension, stem virtut. All of the endings are going to be added onto this stem, and it's a feminine noun. In general, there's no way to predict what the noun, what the gender of the noun is going to be, so you're just going to have to memorize. There are some patterns. There are some fairly consistent feminines that you'll run into, some fairly consistent neuter endings, but when you're starting out, it's best just to memorize those endings, the genders of the nouns. So let's move on to the endings. And we have this standard third declension, which the masculine and feminine nouns are going to follow. And I call this the standard. This is sort of the base declension here. It is what's sometimes called the consonant stem. So pater, patris means father. The stem is going to be pater. And then we've got our ending. So pater, patris, patri, patrem, patre, patres, patrum, patribus, patres, patribus. Now some patterns that can be acknowledged here. First, the accusative singular ends in M. Remember, all accusative singulars end in M. We saw that in the first and second declensions. Neuters are going to be a slight exception there. The ablative singular is going to have a vowel ending. All right, so we had puella, we had amico, and now we have patre. Some other patterns. Genitive plurals end in um. All right, here we just have the we don't have the orum or the arum of the first declension or the orum of the second declension. Here it's just Another pattern that can be seen is accusative plurals end in s. Right, so like we had puellas, we had amicos, and now we have patres. And the final pattern that can be observed is that the dative and ablative plurals are the same. So let's pull out the endings here. The nominative, and I leave this blank because it can be a number of things. We could have rex, king, tempus, time, or pater, father. So this is variable. Put a question mark there. Then is in the genitive, e dative, m accusative, e ablative. Plural, ace, ibus, ace, ibus. So if you take a paradigm like pater, simply memorizing it in this order will help to cement these in your mind. So pater, patres, patri, patrem, patre, patres, patrum, patribus, patres, patribus. So if that's the standard masculine feminine, there's then the standard, the consonant stem neuter declension. And the neuter declension is going to have the same differences that you found in the second declension neuters. That is, the nominative and the accusative are the same. So corpus, corporus, body. So in the singular, corpus, corporus, corpori, corpus, same as the nominative, corpore. So if we look at the singular, these endings are consistent. The genitive, dative, and ablative are consistent with what you already learned. And in the plural, the nominative plural ends in a, just like in the second declension neuters, like dona. Corpora, corporum, corporibus, and then the accusative plural is the same as the nominative plural, corpora, corporibus. So, things to keep in mind here. First, with neuters, nominative and accusative are the same. Nominative plural ends in a. And the other thing to keep in mind, as you will with all third declension nouns, is that the stem is derived from the genitive singular. So we had our standard, our consonant stem. There are also a set of nouns called I stems. And these, as you might imagine, show an I largely throughout. There's really no good way to predict third declension I stems. I'll give you a few hints a bit later, and also say something about it in a minute or two. So the I stems of third declensions: ignis, ignis, fire; igni, ignem, igne. So in the singular, it's exactly what you would expect. It's just like the consonant stem. In the plural, ignes, ignium. Right? And this generally is where you're going to see the I stem show up. And dictionaries, Moreland and Fleischer, many textbooks will key you in that this is an I stem by giving you the principal parts: ignis, ignis, and then in parentheses, ium. So ignes, ignium, ignibus, ignes, and sometimes, very frequently, especially with older Latin, ignis. Here we see the I showing up, and ignibus. So pay attention with I stems in the genitive plural and the accusative plural. And those are I stems of masculine or feminine gender. I stems of neuter genders, like mare, si, mare, maris, are going to be, the I will show up in a number of other positions. So mare, maris, marie, it's perfectly normal. Accusative, mare, okay, just like the nominative. But then in the ablative singular, mari, the I shows up. So the singular, mare, maris, marie, mare, marie. And then in the plural, the nominative plural still ends in a, but that I creeps in. So Maria, Mariam, the genitive, ium, maribus, Maria, just like the nominative plural, and maribus. So with I stem neuters, the things to keep in mind are going to be the ablative singular, which ends in I, the nominative and accusative plural, and the genitive plural. So how do you tell if a noun is an I stem? Well, there are three basic rules that you can hold on to and recognize that it may not always appear. The first is that the nominative and genitive will have the same number of syllables. We call this parasyllabics. Hostis, hostis, masculine. Kiwis, kiwis. So both of these have the same number of syllables, but note that if the stem ends in L or R, the noun is not an I stem. So our first one we ran into, pater, 2 syllables, patris, masculine. The stem ends in R, therefore this is not an I stem. The second rule for I stems will be nouns that are monosyllabic in the nominative, right? They have 1 syllable, and they will end in X or S, and then the stem will end in 2 consonants. So the example I give here, nux, right? Monosyllabic ending in X, and the stem ends in 2 syllables, or two consonants, noctis. So the stem is noct. So the genitive plural here would be noctium. Or ars, artis, art, ars, monosyllabic, ending in S, artis, 2 consonants, therefore the genitive plural would be artium. And finally, the most consistent rule for I stems are neuter nouns whose nominatives end in E, like mare, al, like animal, and ar, like exemplar, example. So these would all follow that mare, maris declension. Now, I mentioned there's a little catch about I stems. I stems slowly went out of use or regularized to consonant stems as the history of Latin progressed, and as the famed grammar Alan Agrino mentions, even the Romans were not necessarily consistent with what nouns were I stems or not. You should just be aware that these exist. Here are 3 very good rules to follow, but know that occasionally you're going to run into a noun which is maybe technically an I stem, but is not treated in the literature as an I stem.